Now I'd like to call on the Asian Development Bank's new Chief Thematic Officer, Ms. Xiaohong Yang. I think it's a perfect time for her to come in now, as we've heard all of the speakers talk about Strategy 2030. Ms. Yang is going to give us an overview of how these projects tie into Strategy 2030, which is the bank's long-term corporate strategy and its operational priorities. Ms. Yang provides strategic operational support and knowledge solutions to client countries, as well as promotes resilient, inclusive, and sustainable recovery. Ms. Yang?
Thank you, moderator. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
Very good. Thank you very much. Let me start. So I'd like to share with you something quite different. So from my point of view, I joined this Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department about a month ago. So I actually look at this overall EO from my operational background. So I was the country director for the Pakistan Mission for ADB. So coming from that background, I truly appreciate the value addition of this Earth observation technology to the projects we're doing in the Asian Pacific region. So indeed, it really increased the development impact and help more communities on the ground. Next. So today I'm going to focus on how this Earth observation technology serves as an enabler for our Strategy 2030. You know, there are three guiding principles here. First of all, we need to use a country-based approach, acknowledging that countries have diverse needs, strengths, and resources. As you can see from previous speakers, every country have different needs. Second, how to promote the innovative technology by carrying out some of the pilot testing, very interesting project design, as previous speaker talked about, how do we really incorporate those as element in the project design. Lastly, how to deliver integrated solutions by looking at the one we call it one ADB approach and supporting the member countries across a wide range of sector and thematic. So I would really want to say this EU application is really getting a very good momentum. Next. So I'm talking about 7 operational priorities in the next slide. Next. So here you can see the operational priorities laid out in the ADB Strategy 2030 are all interlinked and complementary. These are the 7 ones. I don't want to read them. I mean, to save the time, let's go to the next. So here I'm going to give some samples on how we can actually use the valuable tools to tackle the climate change, building the climate and disaster resilience, as previous speakers mentioned, and really enhancing the environmental sustainability. So it is very, very interesting to see how we do in agriculture differently, because we all know there's a lot of productivity issues. When the floods and drought coming, the farmers are really not prepared. So how do we do smart agriculture has a big potential in this region. The place I am sitting now has everyday struggle with this agriculture productivity, and then how do we do a better land use, how to plant the crops which can really generate more results, better results, how do we do better land use planning, climate change mitigation, disaster resilience with a much better increased impact when it comes to the water, food, energy nexus problem. How do we really work with the disaster resilience? Because a lot of disaster resilience are very much related to how you can really get prepared rather than post disaster resilience, emergency projects. So if you can prevent it from happening, that will save a lot of money and then save a lot of lives. So what we are talking about now is a critical important issue, which, you know, it's not visible, but when it happens, it is too late. Next. Here are the samples. You can see across in Bangladesh, Cambodia, India, Kazakhstan, Laos. These are the critical projects we proposed, and really can apply the technology to tackle this issue. Myself have been involved in a lot of interesting areas over my 22 years in ADB. So gradually, we really realized how important it is to map, to do to apply basically the digital technologies much more in advance, run during the project implementation time. So we need much more advanced technology application and then really wider kind of knowledge dissemination to our client countries to make sure they are aware of these issues. If we can do the pilot project successful, that can really change the generation. It is going to be transformational changes. So we talk about here the projects which are like sustainabilities, we generate the environmental impact, we generate, how do you do watershed differently? You know, the last one, for example, in Laos, you know, many projects, they do the rural development, but they forgot the watershed management, which is more important when it comes to the project sustainability, for example. Next. When it comes to making cities more livable, this is a huge area. You will see the big cities are very crowded, and then what we need to do in Asia Pacific is we need to generate many more livable cities, 100,000, 10,000 more, to help to absorb the growing populations, to help to really do better planning before it is too late. So the strengthening the urban planning is so critical to use the satellite-based information to inform the planners, to inform the city urban planners, to take into account the environment, climate resilience, disaster management of cities much ahead of the curve. So otherwise, it will be too late when the city has been built. Next. Here are the samples we can actually apply. For example, the Armenia, the South Caucasus countries, very, very beautiful. A lot of heritage there. You know, in my old days, I visit them very often. You know, the land use, land cover classification is so important for cities like Armenia. You know, it has basically Yerevan is everything. So what we need to do is really develop the secondary cities to really make the secondary cities working and make them more livable and make them really generate the inclusive growth to help the country to overcome a lot of difficulties, great jobs. Cambodia, another sample, the previous speakers mentioned how these water issues can be actually embedded in the project design to show how we can do it differently. Myanmar, it's very crowded, many cities, the capital cities already. So it's now we're talking about how do we do to introduce the urban services into the cities, because many cities, they were built, the urban services are not in place. So the management of the city is another issue. How manage that? In Pacific, absolutely, the urban resilience is so critical because we need good samples in Pacific to do things differently. Next. Here we talk about the rural development and food security. And you already know the farmers are powerless. They really need support. Now, how to support them? We need to introduce knowledge-intensive agriculture. We look at how do we, this year we have cotton very well weathered, then we have much better crop. Next year, no, we are not lucky. So how do we really plan it ahead to increase the food security investment, to really look at the water service delivery and efficiency increase? And it is so critical under this current pandemic period. And we take into issues into the play, because many issues in developing countries, not just water, but also very much on the sanitation, water, cleanness. One of the schools, I visited many rural schools in a rural area. Your heart will be broken. You would see there are no toilets, there are no water drinking places, there are no basically roofs for those education facilities. What are we talking about? We talk about development. How do we change that? Next. So here are the samples we talk about in Cambodia, Mongolia, especially country like Mongolia has extreme weather condition. How do we prevent the drought? How do we really do that? In the old days, when I visit the Mongolia western areas, you can hardly find a place for. I remember in my old days, I traveled 2 weeks without shower, so that kind of environment. So when you look at how do we do a sustainable project, so critical. Tajikistan is another place. I traveled all throughout, south to north, east to west, every corner. When it comes to the water basin issue, it is so fundamental because that's their only water they have to live with. I mean, this is a river. The cities are being built. The populations are living around the cities. Basically, you can travel along the river through the road, and it's very beautiful areas. The mountains, 93% more of this mountains area. How do you do irrigation? How do you really generate some productivity in the agriculture area? It's not easy because it's such a mountainous area. Timor-Leste, another sample. I don't want to talk too much. Coffee planting, everything was so wonderful. Next. Okay, now let's look at other operational opportunities. Probably we can do more. Next. So when we come to governance, because we all know we are struggling, for example, with the tax to GDP ratio very low in our many member countries. So how do we really actually capture some non-use value? Because many of the land have been already cultivated, already have been building, and they have already generated different pattern. So how do we tap the taxes in those areas? Because it's no longer rural, for example. So how do we apply digital technology to look at how do we improve the service delivery? How do we improve cross-border issues in those remote areas? How do we improve the public services through applying IT means? There are many ways. It's just a one click away nowadays, we call it. Even in the remote refugee area, we can deliver services. Next. Okay, this is seen on the OP7. It's about regional cooperation and integration. We talk about the environment and sustainable tourism. After the COVID, I think it is going to be critical. How do we first recover the tourism? Second, how do we develop the sustainable tourism? And how do we really use the EO technology to help us to improve the connectivity and to improve the you know, we also talk about this region is very much less traded, both inter-regionally and interregionally. How do we use that EO, valuable tools to help us to think about what are the solutions we can really help out? Next. Thank you. That's all from me. So I look forward for more questions and answers. Thank you. Over back to you, moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yang. It's a very insightful presentation and equally insightful questions that I hope we will come back around to.